Okay, this is chapter 11 of The Night Singer. 11. It felt like her conscience had been torn in two. Half of it was sitting on the sofa beside Hannah, talking to her as though nothing had happened. Finally sober, having thrown up the last of the alcohol. The other half was floating around the room, desperately searching for a way out, screaming in protest at everything that was going on. Joel is dead. Rebecca tried out the words in her mind, but they didn't sound true. Who was Joel's best friend? Hannah asked her. Hannah, who had once been Rebecca's very best friend, the only person she could share everything with. And yet Rebecca hadn't told her about the baby she was carrying, partly because she was ashamed, because she had done the one thing she had always sworn she never would. She had followed in her mother's footsteps. No, worse than that. At least her mother had finished high school before she got pregnant. Hannah represented sanctuary to Rebecca, and she hadn't wanted to destroy that. With Hannah, she could always pretend that things would change for the better. But then everything with her dad had happened, and it was too late to say anything. Hannah was suddenly gone. Rebecca wanted to believe that if it hadn't been for the pregnancy, she would have left Guardby too. But she had hated being abandoned like that. They had tried to stay in touch via phone and emails, but it had fizzled out before Joel was born. Nadine, she said. Nadine is probably the only real friend Joel had. They were in the same class until year 6 when she moved to Kalmar. Girlfriend? I honestly don't know. I joked about it once, and Joel was furious. Was furious really the right word? Had he shouted or broken anything? He hadn't shouted or broken anything. He had simply glared at her with eyes that were spilling over with anger and disappointment before turning and heading up to his room, where he spent hours hunched over his sketch pad, and now he was gone. No, not gone. Dead. How long had it been before Hannah had told her that Joel was dead? 15 minutes? Half an hour? Rebecca didn't know. Why? How? She combed through the previous day over and over again, searching for even a hint of an answer. When she went to the kitchen with Ulrika to get the birthday cake for Gabriel, Joel and Lena hadn't just been sketching at the table. They were whispering. About what? Joel was weird during the barbecue, she said. Weird how? Absent, more than usual, I mean. Molly wanted to tell one of her jokes, but he wasn't listening, and he always listens to Molly. Sometimes I use her too. How was she supposed to tell Molly? The girl worshipped her big brother. Or her mother. She was at her new boyfriend's place in Karlskrona. When Rebecca was younger, her mother had always been preoccupied with her own problems, both real and imaginary, but with Joel and Molly, she was a fantastic grandmother. Rebecca cast back her mind to the day before. I was restless all night. It was like I could feel that I should have... Was she lying? Yes, she had been restless, but that was hardly because of some maternal sixth sense. Stop, said Hannah. This really isn't your fault. Hannah's hand tightened around her arm. It had been 16 years since they had last spoken, and so much had happened in that time. She was a completely different person now, no longer the girl who drank witch's brew from a badly rinsed-out shampoo bottle down by the harbor. No longer the girl who thought that everything would be wonderful if she could just make it through school. A sense of disgust rose up in her. But if I... No. They sat quietly for a moment. Rebecca couldn't drop the thought that this might never have happened if she had just looked in on Joel a second time during the night, talked to him if he was awake. She was grateful that the other officer had gone. Hannah had held her tight so many times before. Whenever yet another boy broke up with her, whenever she drank too much homemade apple wine. So little had changed. She was almost 35, and she was still making the same fucking mistakes, choosing the wrong men and getting drunk when things didn't work out. The assistant principal's words came back to her. Joel wasn't in school yesterday, either. Why hadn't the school called her? Surely that was their one damn job if a student didn't show up. They were launching a new system that autumn, SchoolSoft, which was supposed to manage absences digitally, but a simple call from the school might have changed everything. Memories of her begging Gabriel not to leave her flashed through Rebecca's mind. Memories of her humiliating herself. It barely felt real now. So what happens next? She asked. We'll investigate what? No, I mean to me. Oh, Rebecca. Hannah swallowed before she continued. You'll force yourself through each day, however hard they are, and little by little it'll get easier. Thanks for the encouragement. Hannah's mother had died when she was young, and Rebecca had watched it all from close up. But this wasn't the same. Joel had come from her own body, and losing him was... "Do you want me to call anyone?" Hannah asked her. "Petrie, but not yet. I need to..." Whatever Rebecca had planned to say vanished, and she couldn't find her way back to it. Weariness wrapped around her mind like barbed wire. "How's Christopher?" she asked. "I haven't heard anything from him either." Sometimes Rebecca couldn't help but wonder what life might have been like if she had chosen Christopher instead. But Axel's self-confidence had been so appealing back then, his money, the promise of another kind of life. In many respects, Christopher had been Axel's opposite. Axel might have looked polished on the surface, but he was a mess inside. With Christopher, the difficult parts were all superficial. He would never have hit her. "Good," said Hannah. "He lives in London now, works in a fancy hotel. He's married, and he's got a daughter who is almost 3. Rebecca nodded. She didn't have anything to say to that. Why had she even asked? She felt a certain urge to put Hannah down, to make her suffer. "People used to call you my shadow," she said. "Do you remember that?" "I remember," said Hannah. She looked away, but Rebecca caught the uncertainty on her face. "Sorry." "It's okay," said Hannah. "Like I've said, we've opened an investigation. That means a couple of forensic technicians will be here soon to go through Joel's room. I know it might seem..." "Just do whatever you need to do," said Rebecca. She felt the weariness spread through her body. Yesterday was becoming increasingly hazy. If only she hadn't drunk so much, and if only she hadn't been so goddamn preoccupied with her own problems, she might have. "Do you know whether Joel was involved in any disputes?" Hannah asked. Rebecca shook her head. Before long, she wouldn't be able to string a single coherent thought together. She was outside herself again, screaming her protest. From there, she didn't simply feel repulsed by herself. Hannah repulsed her, too. She had made her talk like her world hadn't been shattered. But Joel was dead, and she had nothing to say. "I want you to leave now," she said. A sense of despair rose up in her again. How could Joel be dead? The last day. At 11:05, Joel is standing by the counter in Kolzinka, ordering 2 large slices of sticky chocolate cake with extra whipped cream. The little boy behind him in line is staring up at him with wide eyes. "He's probably already had his lunch," his mother tells the boy, indifferent to the fact that Joel can hear every word she says. She probably thinks he should be ashamed of his terrible eating habits. "You don't know anything about me," Joel feels like yelling, though of course he doesn't. "Can I have some cake later, too?" the child asks. "No, not today." "But I promised to eat up." How old is the boy? 4 or 5? He's younger than Molly in any case, but he has already learned exactly what to say. Life is full of disappointment, Joel thinks. You may as well get used to that now. "No," the mother repeats, far more irritably this time. She orders a piece of Mediterranean quiche for herself, waffles for the boy, as though waffles with jam and whipped cream are any healthier than chocolate cake. Joel heads over to their usual table, which luckily happens to be free. He can't deal with any more obstacles today. He sits down on the sofa beneath a portrait of some bearded king and sends a picture of the cakes to Nadine. "Almost there," she replies. 5 minutes later, she comes charging over, giving him a hug. "Have you told her?" she asked. Joel shakes his head. "I thought maybe that was why things were so bad." Joel launches into the same moan he has so many times before, telling Nadine he isn't happy with a single thing in his life, that he wants to be someone else, to move somewhere else, as far away as possible. "Things aren't much better in Kalmar," Nadine tells him. I didn't exactly mean Kalmar when I said far away." "I know, but you're not sure things are better anywhere else, either." Joel wants to ask what it felt like when she swallowed all those pills, whether it was easier than slashing her wrists. Probably, because she almost managed the second time. He wants to tell her how close he came to jumping into the water. If he had kept swimming until he wore himself out, he might not have been able to make it back, even if he changed his mind. Nadine scoops up some whipped cream on her spoon and pulls it back, aiming at him. But she doesn't fire. Instead, she pushes it into her mouth. "I decided to do humanities," she says, "at Stag. Nadine has good grades. There's no doubt she'll get in. Mom thinks Joel does too, but that probably isn't true anymore. All he can hope is that the teachers take pity on him and don't mark him down too much. It's his last term, after all." "I guess we won't be at the same school then," he says, pulling the corners of his mouth as far down as he can. "What, you're not picking arts anymore?" "Nah, health and social care." "Why?" Nadine scoops up yet another spoonful of whipped cream, but this time she actually fires it. It hits the king's beard on the painting behind him. Joel glances around, but no one seems to have noticed. "Lucky for you, you missed," he tells her. "Seriously, though, why?" asks Nadine. "Because I want a job where I can actually earn money. I don't want to be like Mom." I like your mom. Me too, but without Petrie we'd have no money. No, I know, says Nadine. Plus, who wants to rely on some loser man? Joel shares his new theory that Petrie is a flat earther, that the reason he is always getting his folding ruler and spirit level out is because he wants to prove the earth is flat. Nadine laughs so hard she almost falls off her chair. A bald man who must weigh at least 100 kilos pops his head in from the next room and tells them to shut up. Joel gives Nadine a pleading glance, but there is no stopping her, like always. Shut up yourself, she snaps. A few weeks earlier, she had provoked a guy so badly that Joel thought he was going to hit her. It was in the kiosk by the station. Nadine had wanted to buy an energy drink and got into line behind a guy who was texting someone. She pointed out that he meant you, Y-O-U apostrophe R-E, not your, Y-O-U-R, and the guy wheeled around and started screaming at her. This particular man makes do with a shake of his head, but there is a side to Nadine that scares Joel, the fact that she is always so eager to get hurt.